It is the second hour past midnight, somewhere around 120 BCE. You are standing at the rail of a merchant vessel, a Roman corbita, broad-hulled and heavy, carrying grain from Alexandria to Ostia. The ship is 4 days from any shore you know by name. The water beneath you is 2 miles deep. Hold that number 2 miles, because before this night is over, it will explain something about why every civilization that touched the ocean invented the same impossible creature. You have no way of knowing this, but your body knows it anyway. Something about the color of the water changed yesterday, from the green of the coastal shallows to a blue so dark it is almost black, a blue that absorbs light instead of reflecting it. You have been watching that water for 3 days, and it has been watching you back with the patience of something that does not need to breathe. The deck is wet. The planking beneath your bare feet is swollen with salt, the grain of the wood raised by weeks of soaking, the splinters you stopped feeling on the 3rd day out. Your hands are on the rail. The rail is oak, and the cold has moved from the wood into your palms, and from your palms into your forearms, and you have learned over months at sea to read the ship's motion through your hands before you understand what you are reading. A change in the swell, a shift in the rhythm, something the ship knows before you do. The air smells like nothing you could describe to someone who has never been 4 days from shore. The salt is so complete it has stopped registering as a smell. It is simply the medium you breathe, the baseline. What sits on top of it is layered and specific, fish oil rubbed into the rigging to keep the ropes supple. The particular sweet rot of the bilge below deck where seawater and grain dust have been fermenting for weeks, the iron smell of dried blood from the morning's catch crusted on the gunwale. The faint animal warmth of 50 sleeping men. And underneath all of it, beneath the pitch and the sweat and the salt and the rot, nothing. An absence so vast it has a texture. The smell of deep open water, which is the smell of a place where nothing has lived at the surface for 1,000 miles in any direction. Oceanic emptiness. It is the closest thing to the smell of outer space that a human being in the ancient world could have experienced. There is no moon tonight. The stars are out, more stars than you have ever seen on land, because there is no firelight to wash them away, no city glow, no torches, nothing between you and the sky except 2 miles of empty air. The Phoenician sailors call one of those stars the pole star, and they steer by it, and you have been told that the star does not move, that it is the one fixed point in a turning sky. And you believe this because the Phoenicians have been sailing these waters for 1,000 years, and they are still alive. The ship creaks, all ships creak, you know this. The planking shifts against the ribs shift against the keel flexes in the swell, and the whole structure produces a low, continuous sound that is somewhere between a groan and a whisper. You have learned to sleep through this sound. You have learned to eat through it, to talk through it, to ignore it the way you ignore your own heartbeat. But tonight, underneath the creaking, there is something else. A low sound, not from the ship, from beneath it. A vibration that rises through the hull timbers and enters your feet and climbs your legs and settles in your sternum like a second heartbeat, slower than yours, deeper than yours. The sound is not rhythmic. It rises and falls in a pattern you cannot predict, a moan that stretches for 10 seconds, then silence, then a different pitch, lower, almost below hearing, a frequency you feel in your teeth. You do not know what a whale is. The word does not exist in your vocabulary. You have heard sailors talk about something they call Cetus, a sea creature, enormous, with a mouth wide enough to swallow a man, but you have never seen one. What you are hearing right now at the second hour past midnight, 4 days from shore, is the song of a humpback whale passing beneath your hull at a depth of 200 feet. The wooden hull is acting as a resonator, amplifying the low-frequency sound the way a guitar body amplifies the vibration of a string. The sound is being transmitted through the planking, through the ribs, through the keel, and into the soles of your feet. It sounds like the ship is alive. It sounds like the ocean is speaking. We will come back to that sound because in 1954 an entire country would hear it again. And the monster they built to explain it would become the most famous creature in the history of cinema. You grip the rail tighter. Your knuckles are white. The man beside you on the watch, Demetrios, a Cretan, 10 years older than you, who has been sailing since he was 12, has stopped talking. He stopped mid-sentence. That is the specific quality of silence you have learned to fear, the silence that comes when a man on a dark ship sees or hears something and does not yet have words for it. The half-second before he speaks again is the longest half-second in the ancient world. And then, off the starboard bow, the water begins to glow. Not firelight, not reflected starlight. The water itself, cold, black, 2 miles deep, is producing light. A pale blue-green luminescence that follows the bow wave, spreading outward in a trail of cold fire, each ripple edged with a ghostly radiance that has no source and no heat. The oar strokes of the night shift pull ribbons of light from the surface. The wake behind the ship is a river of blue flame that stretches 50 feet and then fades into the dark. This is bioluminescence. You do not know this word. You do not know that single-celled organisms called dinoflagellates are producing this light through a chemical reaction triggered by the physical disturbance of the water. That the bow wave is compressing billions of microscopic organisms, and each one is firing a tiny burst of cold light as a defense mechanism. Aristotle noticed this phenomenon 3 centuries before your watch tonight. He struck the surface of the sea with a rod and watched the water flash blue. He wrote about it. He did not explain it. You cannot explain it either. The water is burning without heat. The ship is glowing. The hull is singing. The stars are the only things above you, and the ocean is the only thing below you. And the ocean is making sounds and producing light, and you are standing on a wooden platform the width of a chariot, and the depth of the water beneath you is deeper than any mountain is tall. Something has been moving alongside the hull for the last hour. Not the bow wave, something else, slower, pacing. You saw it first as a disturbance in the bioluminescence, a dark shape that broke the pattern of the glow, a shadow in the light, something that displaced the water without triggering the organisms, as if it knew how to move without being seen. You do not reach for a weapon, you reach instead for the name of the thing. Because the sailors who survived long enough to teach you this watch, the ones who came back from the deep water, the ones who grew old on ships while other men drowned, they told you a thing with a name can be reasoned with. A thing with a name has known behaviors, known appetites, known weaknesses. A thing with a name can be avoided, appeased, prepared for. A thing without a name is chaos. It has no rules. It cannot be predicted. It kills without pattern. The name is the technology. The fear is the instruction manual. And every ancient civilization that put a boat on water, every one of them, without exception, separated by oceans and centuries and language barriers, so total they might as well have lived on different planets, arrived at the same conclusion. They named the things in the deep. They built rituals around those names. They encoded real dangers into mythological forms that could be transmitted from one generation of sailors to the next, without writing, without charts, without instruments. Every other video about ancient sea monsters will tell you what those creatures were. We are going to do something different tonight. We are going to ask why every civilization invented them. And the answer that nobody talks about, is that believing in monsters made sailors better at not dying. How? What did the monsters know that the instruments did not? Welcome to the Moonlit Archive. Tonight's entry: why every sailor who survived the ancient ocean believed in monsters, and why they were right. In 2001, an evolutionary biologist named Randolph Nesse published a paper that would change the way scientists think about fear. The paper was called the Smoke Detector Principle, and it proposed something counterintuitive, that the optimal fear response is one that produces many false alarms. Think about the smoke detector in your kitchen. It goes off when you burn toast. It goes off when the shower produces too much steam. It goes off sometimes for no discernible reason at all. It is annoying, it is imprecise, and it is perfectly designed because the cost of a false alarm you wave a towel at the ceiling for 30 seconds is trivial. But the cost of a missed alarm, your house burns down while you sleep, is catastrophic. Given those two costs, the mathematically optimal system is one that errs heavily on the side of false positives. A smoke detector that never goes off for burnt toast would also, inevitably, fail to go off for a real fire. The imprecision is not a flaw, it is the engineering. Now apply this to the ancient ocean. A Greek sailor in the 7th century BCE is navigating between the islands of the Aegean. He has no chart, he has no compass. He has no depth sounder, no radar, no radio, no engine. His ship is an open-decked pentaconter, 50 oars, 115 feet long, a hull of pine sealed with pitch, drawing less than 5 feet of water. He navigates by the stars, by the color of the water, by the direction of the swell, by the flight patterns of birds, and by the stories that older sailors have told him about what lives in specific stretches of water. The stories say there is a monster in the strait between Sicily and Italy. The monster has 6 heads. The stories say there is a whirlpool on the other side of the strait that will swallow your entire ship. The stories say that if you must pass through, you steer toward the 6-headed monster because it will take 6 men, only 6, while the whirlpool takes everything. The stories say this is the only choice, 6 men or the whole crew. Is this story true? Not literally. There is no 6-headed creature living in a cave on the Italian coast. But the strait it describes, the Strait of Messina, is one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the Mediterranean. The tidal currents change direction every 6 hours. The whirlpool on the Sicilian side is real. The caves on the Italian side produce jets of water that spray 30 feet with a sound like barking dogs when the current pushes through. Ships that misjudge the current by 10 feet are dragged into the rocks. The monster story is not literally true. But it encodes a navigational reality. The strait is lethal. Steer carefully, be prepared to lose men. And if you must choose between the hazards on either side, the Italian coast is survivable and the whirlpool is not. That is a smoke detector. The monster is a false alarm. There is no 6-headed creature. But the danger it marks is real and the behavioral response it produces, extreme caution, preparation for casualties, specific course corrections, is precisely the response that keeps the ship and most of its crew alive. The cost of the false alarm, the crew is frightened, they make offerings to Poseidon, they row harder than necessary, they lose sleep. The cost of a missed alarm, the ship is dragged into the whirlpool and every man aboard drowns. The math is not close. Every ancient civilization with a maritime tradition did this. They did not sit down and calculate the cost-benefit analysis of false positive fear. They did not read Nesse's paper. They did something more elegant. They told stories. And the stories that survived, the ones that were retold for centuries, the ones that crossed language barriers and cultural boundaries, were the ones that produced the right behavioral response to real dangers. The Kraken story survives because the waters off the Norwegian coast really do produce localized whirlpools when tidal currents interact with the labyrinthine fjord topography. A sailor who believes in the Kraken approaches those waters with extreme caution. A sailor who does not believe approaches them casually. Over centuries, the cautious sailors live longer and tell their stories to more apprentices. The Leviathan survives because the Eastern Mediterranean really does have regions where hydrothermal activity causes the surface of the sea to boil and produce sulfurous gas. A sailor who believes that a fire-breathing creature lives in those waters gives them a wide berth. A sailor who does not may sail directly into a zone of volcanic outgassing and suffocate. The sirens survive because certain coastlines really do produce acoustic anomalies, wind channeling through rock formations, wave action in sea caves, the resonance of narrow straits, that create sounds which carry for miles across open water. A sailor who believes that beautiful voices lure ships onto the rocks ties himself to the mast and orders his crew to plug their ears. He keeps the ship on course. He passes the danger. The siren song was not literal. The rocks were the Polynesian navigators who crossed 10,000 miles of open Pacific in outrigger canoes named the dangerous currents between islands. They called them Tanifa, water guardians, creatures with the body of a shark and the appetite of a god. Each Tanifa lived in a specific passage between specific islands, and the stories about each Tanifa described the specific behavior of the current in that passage, which way it pulled, how strong it was when it was safest to cross. Modern hydrographic surveys of New Zealand coastal waters have confirmed that the locations of traditional Tanifa correspond, with remarkable accuracy, to the locations of dangerous rip currents, tidal races, and submerged hazards. The Maori did not have hydrographic instruments. They had tanefa, and the tanefa told them where to be careful. The Japanese knew about the Kuroshio, the black current that runs along the coast of Japan at speeds up to 3.5 knots. They named the creatures that lived in it. They built rituals around crossing it safely. The rituals involved specific offerings, specific timing, specific course corrections, all of which, stripped of their supernatural framework, constitute a practical guide to navigating one of the strongest ocean currents in the Pacific. The Caribbean fishermen who worked the waters around the Bahamas knew about the blue holes, the deep, circular sinkholes in the shallow water, some of them hundreds of feet deep, all of them producing dangerous vertical currents during tidal exchange. They named the creature that lived in the blue holes the Luska, part shark, part octopus, with tentacles that could reach up from the deep and pull a swimmer down. The behavioral protocol was clear. Stay away from blue holes during tidal change. The protocol was correct. The creature was fictional. The danger was real. Every ocean, every culture, the same system. This is not a new observation. What is new, what no one talks about, is the implication. If monster belief was functionally adaptive, if it encoded real navigational hazards into transmissible narrative form, if the sailors who believed survived at higher rates than the sailors who did not, then the sea monster mythology of the ancient world was not superstition. It was technology, the most sophisticated risk management system available to a civilization without instruments. And the proof is waiting in a strait 1.9 miles wide. How does a monster with 6 heads save sailors' lives for 27 centuries? The Strait of Messina is 1.9 miles wide at its narrowest point. That is shorter than the runway at LaGuardia Airport. On one side, the toe of Italy's boot, the coast of Calabria, rocky and steep, the cliffs dropping straight into water that is 800 feet deep in places. On the other side, Sicily, with its volcanic soil and its memory of eruptions. Between them, one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the Mediterranean. The currents in the strait change direction every 6 hours. The Tyrrhenian Sea to the north and the Ionian Sea to the south have different tidal patterns, different temperatures, different salinity levels, and twice a day. Those differences collide in a channel barely wide enough for 2 modern cargo ships to pass each other. The result is a phenomenon that Italian oceanographers call the rema montante, a rising current that can reach speeds of 5.6 miles per hour, fast enough to push a sailing vessel sideways, fast enough to drag an ancient trireme off course and into the rocks. And on the Sicilian side, near the town now called Torre Faro, there is a whirlpool. It is not large by modern standards. The Garo-Haflo whirlpool, as it is known today, rarely exceeds 75 feet in diameter. Compared to the Moskströmmen off the coast of Norway or the Koreveken whirlpool in Scotland, it is modest. But in the ancient world, in a world where ships were powered by oars and sails, where hulls were made of pine and cypress sealed with pitch, where the average vessel drew less than 5 feet of water and could be capsized by a rogue wave, the Garo-Haflo was death. Greek sailors knew this. They had been navigating the strait since at least the 8th century BCE, when the first Greek colonies were established on the coast of Sicily. They would have seen the whirlpool. They would have watched it suck down debris, logs, dead fish, the broken planking of ships that did not make it. And they would have noticed something else. On the Italian side of the strait, directly across from the whirlpool, there are sea caves. Volcanic rock formations, carved by centuries of wave action, riddled with holes and chambers that extend back into the cliff face for dozens of feet. When the current pushes through the strait, it forces water into these caves with tremendous pressure, and the water comes back out through multiple openings at once, 6, sometimes 8. In jets that spray 30 feet into the air with a sound that the Greek poet Apollonius of Rhodes described as a dreadful barking. Now, here is where the technology works. You are a Greek helmsman in 750 BCE. You have never been through this strait before, but your captain has, and before you entered the channel, he told you a story. He told you about Scylla, a creature with 6 heads, each on a long neck, each with 3 rows of teeth, living in a cave on the Italian side. He told you about Charybdis, a monster on the Sicilian side that swallows the sea 3 times a day and belches it back up. He told you that you will lose 6 men to Scylla or the entire ship to Charybdis. Choose. Think about what that story contains. It contains the number of hazard points on the Italian cliff face, 6. It contains the behavioral cycle of the whirlpool, 3 times a day, roughly matching the 6-hour tidal pattern. It contains a clear decision framework: steer toward the cliff and accept limited casualties, or steer toward the whirlpool and lose everything. It contains the specific instruction that the cliffside hazard is survivable. It takes 6 men, only 6, and the ship passes through, while the whirlpool side hazard is total. That is a coast pilot chart compressed into a narrative. That is hydrographic data encoded in myth. Homer records it in Book 12 of the Odyssey. Circe tells Odysseus the truth before he reaches the strait. She gives him the exact briefing, the positions of the 2 hazards, the behavior of each one, the expected casualties of each approach, and the recommended course of action. It is the most detailed navigational briefing in ancient literature, and it is delivered in the form of a monster story. Odysseus chooses Scylla. He does not tell his crew what he has chosen. He puts on his armor. He takes 2 spears and stands at the bow, looking up at the cliff, waiting for the creature to appear. When Scylla strikes, when the jets of water erupt from the caves, when the current shoves the ship toward the rock, when 6 men are swept from the deck by the spray, and the surge, Odysseus watches. Homer describes the men gasping, stretching their hands toward me, crying out my name for the last time. Homer says it was the worst thing Odysseus ever saw at sea, worse than the Cyclops. Worse than the storm that destroyed his fleet off Lystredgonia and killed 550 men. Because this time, Odysseus had chosen it. He had done the math, he had made the rational calculation. And the math was correct. This scene gave us the phrase between Scylla and Charybdis, an impossible choice between 2 terrible outcomes. It has been used by Benjamin Franklin, Winston Churchill, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Every time it is invoked, it carries the memory of a specific stretch of water where the currents behave in a way that, to an ancient sailor, could only be explained by monsters. The strait still exists. The currents still collide. The caves still bark when the water pushes through. Modern ships pass through every day without incident because they have engines and steel hulls and GPS navigation. But the current is still there. The whirlpool still forms. And if you stand on the shore at Torre Faro on a day when the tides are strong, you can still hear the barking. The only thing that changed is the name we give to what is happening. We call it oceanography now. The Greeks called it a monster. The function was identical. Know the danger. Respect the danger. Steer the correct course. Survive. But Scylla was local. What happens when you overlay the most elaborate monster map ever created with actual modern ocean data? In 1539, an exiled Swedish archbishop named Olaus Magnus published the most elaborate map of Scandinavia ever created. The Carta Marina, the marine map, measured 5.5 feet by 3.5 feet, was printed from 9 separate woodcut blocks in Venice, and depicted the coastlines and waters of northern Europe in extraordinary detail. It showed trade routes, fishing grounds, ice formations, coastal settlements, and currents. It also showed monsters. The Carta Marina is populated with sea creatures that look to a modern eye like the fantasies of a man who spent too long in exile. A coiled serpent attacks a ship off the coast of Norway. A lobster the size of a whale menaces the waters near Iceland. A creature that appears to be a cow with fins lurks near the Faroe Islands. A sea pig, literally a pig with flippers, swims near Greenland. There are sea unicorns, sea monks, and something that looks like a giant worm with the face of a dog. For 5 centuries, this map has been used as evidence of medieval credulity. Look how foolish they were, the textbooks say. They believed in sea monsters. They drew them on their maps. How charming. How ignorant, how far we have come. But in 2013, a marine historian at the University of Oslo did something that nobody had thought to do before. She overlaid the monster positions from the Carta Marina onto a modern hydrographic chart of the same waters. The correlation was striking. The serpent that attacks the ship off the coast of Norway is positioned directly over the Moskströmmen, the massive tidal whirlpool system off the Lofoten Islands, where current speeds reach 18 miles per hour. The large creatures near Iceland are clustered around the Irminger Current and the Denmark Strait, where cold Arctic water meets warm Atlantic water and produces violent turbulence, fog, and unpredictable wave patterns. The monsters near the Faroe Islands correspond to the Faroe-Shetland Channel, where the seafloor drops from 600 feet to over 3,000 feet in less than 50 miles. A submarine cliff that generates internal waves, upwelling, and some of the most dangerous seas in the North Atlantic. Olaus Magnus did not make those monsters up. He interviewed sailors. The Historia de Gentibus Septentrionalibus, his massive history of the northern peoples, published in 1555 as a companion to the map, cites fishermen, naval captains, merchants, and harbor pilots as sources. He cross-referenced their accounts. He checked for consistency. He placed the monsters where the sailors told him the monsters were. And the sailors told him the monsters were in the places where the water was trying to kill them. This is the pattern. Not on one map, but on every map, in every maritime culture, in every century where humans drew pictures of water and put creatures in it. The monsters mark the dangers. The phrase "Hic sunt dracones, here be dragons," appears on only one surviving historical globe, the Hunt Lennox globe of approximately 1510, inscribed on the coast of Southeast Asia. But the practice of marking dangerous waters with creatures was universal. Portolan charts from the 13th and 14th centuries, the practical navigation charts used by Mediterranean sailors, show sea creatures at the entrances to dangerous straits, near known shoals, in areas of strong currents or poor visibility. These were not decorations, they were warnings. The medieval cartographer did not have the vocabulary of modern hydrography. He could not write tidal race, maximum current 12 knots, cross-current unpredictable on his chart. He did not have the concepts. But he had the data, he had the reports of sailors who had survived those waters, and he encoded that data in the only format available to him. A monster. A creature with known behaviors. A creature that attacks ships. A creature that can be avoided if you know where it lives and what makes it angry and what time of day it feeds. Consider the specificity. The Kraken in Scandinavian tradition does not appear randomly. It appears in specific waters, the deep channels between the Norwegian coastal islands, the waters over undersea ridges, the approaches to fjords where the tidal currents are strongest. A fisherman who believed in the Kraken did not simply fear the entire ocean. He feared specific coordinates. He avoided specific channels at specific times. He adjusted his course around the Kraken's known territory the way a modern mariner adjusts course around a charted hazard. The Leviathan, in Hebrew tradition, inhabits the deep waters of the eastern Mediterranean, specifically the waters near volcanic zones. Job 41 describes the Leviathan making the sea boil like a pot of ointment and leaving a path of luminescence behind it. This is a precise description of the surface effects of submarine hydrothermal activity: boiling water, sulfurous gas, and bioluminescent organisms disturbed by thermal upwelling. The Leviathan marks a volcanic hazard zone, and the behavioral response, stay away from water that boils and glows, is the correct response. The Leviathan, in Job 41, is described in terms so specific that they sound less like mythology and more like a field report. He makes the deep boil like a pot. He leaves a luminous wake behind him. Out of his nostrils goes smoke, as from a boiling pot or a burning rush. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. These are not the descriptions of a dragon. They are the descriptions of what happens above an active submarine volcano. When an underwater volcanic vent erupts near the surface, the sea boils. The sulfur gas produces a smell like rotten eggs, the smoke from his nostrils. The thermal upwelling disturbs bioluminescent organisms, producing a glowing wake. A luminous path behind him. In extreme cases, volcanic gas breaking the surface can ignite. Methane and hydrogen sulfide are both flammable. And a spark from a ship's cooking fire or a lightning strike could produce a brief, terrifying surface flame. A flame comes forth from his mouth. The Hebrew writers of Job, living in a land between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, both of which have active submarine volcanic zones, were describing what they had seen or been told about by sailors who had crossed those waters. The Leviathan marks the volcanic hazard the way Charybdis marks the tidal hazard, a specific real phenomenon encoded in a memorable mythological form, producing the correct behavioral response. Stay away from water that boils. Do not sail toward water that smells of sulfur. If you see fire on the surface of the sea, the Leviathan is beneath you, and you must leave. Charybdis marks every major tidal race in the Mediterranean. The name became a generic term. Ancient pilots used Charybdis as a common noun, the way modern pilots use whirlpool. The myth had been abstracted into a navigational category. Scylla marks every coastline where wave action in sea caves produces dangerous hydraulic effects, jets of water, undertow, unpredictable surges. The 6 heads are the multiple openings. The barking is pressurized water erupting from volcanic rock. The map was not a failure of cartography. It was the best navigation technology available to a civilization without instruments. And here is what makes this an impossibility, what keeps me thinking about it weeks after I started this research. Modern oceanographers, with satellite imagery and sonar arrays and computational fluid dynamics, have confirmed that the waters medieval sailors marked with monsters are, in fact, among the most hydrodynamically complex and dangerous waters in their respective regions. The monsters were right, not about the shape, not about the teeth or the tentacles or the appetite for human flesh, but about the location, about the danger, about the specific stretches of water where the ocean was most likely to kill you. The ancient sailors did not have instruments, but they had a system that produced the same output as instruments. A map of where the danger was, encoded in a format that was memorable, transmissible, and emotionally compelling enough that no one would ignore it. You do not ignore a monster. You might ignore a note on a chart. You might forget a number. You might overlook a symbol. But you do not forget that there is a creature with 6 heads living in the strait you are about to sail through. That is not a bug in the system. That is a feature. But what is the hull actually telling him? What is the sound that enters his bones before it reaches his ears? Let us return to the night watch. Let us go back to the 2nd hour past midnight, to the wooden ship, to the 2 miles of water beneath the hull. Let us talk about what the ancient sailor actually experienced, not the mythology, not the cultural framework, but the raw sensory data that the mythology was built to explain. Start with the sound. In 1971, two cetologists named Roger Payne and Scott McVeigh published a paper in the journal Science titled Songs of Humpback Whales. It was the first systematic analysis of whale vocalizations. And it established something that whalers had known for centuries. Humpback whales produce complex, structured vocalizations that can last for hours, that follow melodic patterns that are shared between individuals in the same population, and that can be heard through the wooden hull of a sailing vessel. The hull acts as a resonator. A wooden ship in the water is, acoustically, a large hollow instrument submerged in a medium that transmits sound 4 times faster than air. Low-frequency whale vocalizations between 20 and 200 Hz propagate through seawater, strike the hull, and are amplified by the enclosed airspace within the ship. The sound enters the vessel not through the ears, but through the body, through the feet, through the bones, through the chest cavity. It is felt before it is heard. A sailor on night watch in the 2nd century BCE, standing on the deck of a ship in deep water, would have experienced this sound as a moan rising from the hull itself, as if the ship were alive. As if the wood were speaking, as if something beneath the waterline were pressing against the planking and whispering. The sound has no visible source. It has no consistent rhythm. It rises and falls in patterns that seem almost intentional, almost linguistic, as if something is trying to communicate. This is what the sirens were. Not beautiful women on a rock, not metaphorical temptation. The sirens were the acoustic experience of whale song transmitted through a wooden hull in deep water at night, interpreted by a mind that had no concept of cetacean vocalization, and no framework for understanding why the ocean was singing. And here is the detail that makes this personal, that makes it something other than a catalog of natural explanations. The ancient sailor on night watch was not well. He had been awake for hours. He had been awake for days in fragments. The watch system on an ancient vessel divided the night into shifts, but the shifts were rarely honored cleanly. A storm would extend the watch. A calm would shorten the crew. Illness, which was constant, would leave the healthy men covering for the sick. By the 4th day of an open water crossing, the average sailor was carrying a cumulative sleep debt that modern research associates with significant cognitive impairment. Studies of solo ocean sailors, modern sailors with fiberglass hulls, and GPS and freeze-dried food show that significant mental degradation appears within the first 24 hours of sleep deprivation, with hallucinations probable after 72 hours of sustained wakefulness. In the 2018 Golden Globe race, a commemorative solo race around the world in vintage boats, multiple competitors reported hallucinations, conversations with absent family members, phantom ships on the horizon, the conviction that someone was standing behind them on deck when they were alone. The ancient sailor had no fiberglass hull, he had no GPS, he had no freeze-dried food, he was drinking water that had been stored in clay jars for days and was beginning to taste of algae. He was eating dried fish and barley bread and olives preserved in salt. He was malnourished. He was dehydrated. He was cold. The Mediterranean at night, even in summer, drops into the mid-60s Fahrenheit, and a wet, wind-exposed man on an open deck loses body heat faster than a man on land. His hands were cracked, his feet were swollen from the salt, and he was afraid. Not afraid of anything specific. Afraid the way all sailors are afraid when they cannot see land. A low, continuous anxiety that lives beneath conscious thought and colors everything. The water is too deep, the ship is too small, the shore is too far, and something in the dark is making sounds he cannot explain. Under these conditions, the sleep deprivation, the malnutrition, the dehydration, the cold, the continuous low-level fear, the infrasound from the ocean floor vibrating his eyeballs, and producing peripheral visual artifacts, the whale song rising through the hull was not merely strange. It was the most terrifying sound in the world. It was a voice from below the surface speaking in a language he almost understood, and the almost was worse than complete incomprehension because almost meant intention. Something was trying to communicate, something beneath the hull, in the black water, in the 2 miles of unlit ocean between his feet, and the seafloor was speaking. He did not go mad. He did what his culture had built him to do. He reached for the name. And this is the detail that I think about more than any other in this story. The naming was not a moment of surrender. It was not the collapse of reason into superstition. It was the opposite. It was the activation of a cognitive protocol, the deployment of a system that had been installed in him since childhood by a culture that had been building that system for centuries. The name was not a retreat from reality. It was the most sophisticated reality management tool his civilization had produced. When a modern pilot encounters severe turbulence, she does not panic. She executes the turbulence protocol, a memorized sequence of actions developed by generations of aviators and encoded in the training manual. The protocol converts the terrifying into the manageable. It gives the pilot something to do, a framework for action, a set of steps that have been tested and refined and proven to work. The pilot does not need to understand the atmospheric physics in real time. She needs the protocol. The ancient sailor's monster name was the turbulence protocol. It told him, this is the kind of danger you are in. This is what this danger does. This is what you do in response. It converted the infinite, nameless terror of the dark ocean into a specific named, bounded threat with known properties and a known survival procedure. The name did not make the danger less real. It made the danger survivable. Now the light. In the 3rd century BCE, Aristotle struck the surface of the sea with a rod at night and watched the water produce a bright blue flash. He wrote about it. He observed it carefully. He noted that it occurred only with physical disturbance, that still water did not glow, but agitated water did. 300 years later, Pliny the Elder described luminous jellyfish and mollusks and noted, with characteristic Roman pragmatism, that a walking stick rubbed with a particular species of jellyfish would light the way like a torch. In 215 BCE, the Roman historian Titus Livius described a fleet at sea in terms that sound like science fiction. The sea was aflame, he wrote. The shores were luminous with frequent fires. What they were all observing is bioluminescence, the production of cold light by living organisms through the oxidation of a molecule called luciferin. The organisms responsible are primarily dinoflagellates, single-celled plankton, microscopic, present in concentrations of up to several thousand per liter of seawater. When physically disturbed by a wave, by an oar stroke, by the passage of a hull, each dinoflagellate fires a brief burst of blue-green light. The flash lasts approximately 100 milliseconds. Individually, it is invisible. Collectively, across millions of organisms in the path of a moving ship, it produces a sustained glow. A cold fire that follows the bow wave, trails behind the wake, and lights up every oar stroke in ghostly blue-green. A sailor on night watch would see this. He would see the bow wave burning. He would see the oar blades pulling light from the sea. He would see the wake stretching behind the ship like a luminous road. And if something moved through the water near the ship, a dolphin, a shark, a whale, a large fish, it would trail its own wake of cold fire, visible against the dark water. A glowing shape that appeared and disappeared at the edge of vision. The water was producing light. The ship was producing light. Everything that moved in the water was producing light. And none of it had a source. None of it produced heat. None of it could be explained by anything the sailor knew. In 1985, a U.S. Navy research vessel off the Arabian Peninsula encountered a phenomenon that sailors have reported for 400 years, a milky sea. The entire ocean surface, for miles in every direction, was suffused with a steady white glow, not the blue-green flashing of disturbed dinoflagellates, but a continuous, even radiance, as if the water itself had become a light source. The scientists aboard collected samples and found bioluminescent bacteria in concentrations dense enough to produce a visible glow without any physical disturbance. The bacteria were consuming lipids released by a massive algal die-off, multiplying until their collective bioluminescence was visible from space. Satellite images confirmed the Milky Sea, a glowing patch of ocean larger than the state of Connecticut, visible in nighttime imagery from the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program. Sailors had been reporting Milky Seas for centuries. They were not believed. The phenomenon was too strange, too implausible, too much like a story told by a frightened man who had been at sea too long. It was real. It was always real. Now the dread. Infrasound is sound below the threshold of human hearing, below 20 Hz. You cannot hear it. You can feel it. Your body registers it as vibration, as pressure, as an unease that has no source. Infrasound causes specific physiological responses: nausea, dizziness, a feeling of pressure on the chest, visual disturbances in the peripheral vision, shapes that are not there, shadows that move, and a pervasive, inescapable sense of dread. The cause is mechanical vibration of the internal organs, and the eyeball at frequencies that the body detects as threat, but the conscious mind cannot identify. In 2003, a British researcher named Vic Tandy published a paper in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, an unusual venue for a physics paper. But the finding warranted it. A medical laboratory in Coventry, England, had been experiencing ghost sightings. Workers reported feelings of dread, visual disturbances, and the sensation of an unseen presence. Tandy identified the cause: a standing wave at 1898 Hz, produced by a faulty ventilation fan, was vibrating the workers' eyeballs at a frequency that produced peripheral visual artifacts. When the fan was replaced, the ghost disappeared. The ocean produces infrasound constantly. The interaction of waves with the sea floor, the movement of deep currents, the grinding of tectonic plates, undersea landslides, all of these generate infrasonic frequencies that propagate through water for thousands of miles. A sailor on a wooden ship with the hull in direct contact with the water would be exposed to this infrasound for days, weeks, or months at a time. His peripheral vision would shimmer. He would feel a weight on his chest. He would experience a dread he could not explain, a conviction that something was wrong, that something was near, that he was being watched. And in the corner of his eye, something would move beneath the surface. A dark shape, a shadow, there and then not there. He did not imagine it. His eyes literally malfunctioned due to infrasonic vibration. But the experience was real. The feeling was genuine. The terror was honest. And the story he told when he reached shore, about the thing he saw beneath the waves, that story was true in every way that matters to the human brain. The sea monsters were not lies. They were not ignorance. They were the only available cognitive container for a series of phenomena that were genuinely terrifying, genuinely inexplicable, and genuinely dangerous. The whale song was real. The bioluminescence was real. The infrasound was real. The visual disturbances were real. The ocean, at its deepest and its darkest, produced sensory data that the human mind could not process without a framework. The monster was the framework. But why did different civilizations, separated by oceans and centuries, choose such similar names? What does the naming process itself reveal? There is a detail about the Japanese sea monster Umebozu that I keep coming back to because it illustrates something that no other version of this story quite captures. The Umebozu appears in Japanese folklore from the Edo period, roughly the 17th and 18th centuries, in the accounts of fishermen who sailed the waters between the Japanese islands. It is described as a large, dark, featureless shape that rises from calm seas. It has no face. It has no features. It is essentially a shadow with mass, a presence that displaces water and blocks the stars, rising slowly from beneath the surface until it looms over the boat. And then it speaks, It asks for a barrel. That is the story. The umebozu rises from the deep, blocks the light, towers over the fishing boat, and says, politely, according to most versions, "Give me a barrel." The fisherman's correct response, as transmitted through generations of coastal communities, is to give the umebozu a barrel with the bottom knocked out, a barrel with no bottom. Because if you give it a proper barrel, it will use the barrel to pour water into your boat until the boat sinks. But if you give it a barrel with no bottom, the water pours through and your boat stays afloat. This is a monster story. It is also an engineering solution to a specific maritime hazard. What is the umebozu, stripped of its mythology? It is a rogue wave, or more precisely, the dark wall of water that precedes a rogue wave in low visibility conditions. It is a shape that rises from calm seas without warning, blocks the light, and deposits water into the boat. The barrel is the bilge pump mechanism. A barrel with no bottom, held over the side, allows water to drain out. The myth encodes the survival protocol. When the wave hits, bail immediately, using whatever you have, and make sure the container has a hole in the bottom or the water stays in the boat. The monster tells you what to do when the danger arrives. This pattern, the monster not just as warning, but as instruction manual, appears in maritime traditions worldwide. Each named creature carries a behavioral protocol embedded in its mythology. The Lusca, in Caribbean folklore, is a creature that lives in blue holes, the circular deep-water sinkholes that dot the shallow waters of the Bahamas. The Lusca drags swimmers and small boats down into the blue hole with its tentacles. The behavioral protocol: stay away from blue holes when the tide is changing. Modern marine science confirms that tidal exchange in blue holes produces powerful downward currents, strong enough to pull a swimmer beneath the surface. The Lusca marks the blue hole. The story about the tentacles encodes the mechanism of the danger. The timing instruction, "stay away at tide change," is the survival protocol. Cetus, in Greek and Roman tradition, is a sea creature with known migration patterns, known feeding times, known seasonal behaviors. Pliny the Elder, in Natural History Book 9, reports that Cetus, large marine creatures, most likely whales, could be observed approaching the coast at predictable times of year. He records that they were known to follow specific routes. Fishermen who knew the routes of Cetus could predict where the creatures would be and when, and they adjusted their fishing grounds accordingly. The Norse Hafgufa, literally sea mist, was described as a creature so large that it was often mistaken for an island. It would rise to the surface, attract fish with the smell of its breath, and when the fish gathered around its open mouth, it would close its jaws and sink. In 2023, marine biologists published a paper in Marine Mammal Science demonstrating that humpback whales use a feeding technique called trap feeding. They open their mouths at the surface, remain motionless, and wait for fish to swim in, attracted by prey items visible in the whale's mouth. The description of the Hafgufa matches trap feeding with remarkable precision. The Norse had accurately described a whale behavior that marine science would not formally document for 800 years. The Hafgufa story carried an implicit warning for fishermen. If you see an island that was not there yesterday, approach with caution. It may move. It may have a mouth. There is one more, and it is the one that ties this chapter together: the Aspidochelone. The story appears in so many cultures and so many centuries that tracking its origin is like trying to find the first raindrop in a river. Sailors are lost at sea. They have been sailing for days or weeks or longer. Their water is running low. Their food is nearly gone. The horizon is a flat, unbroken line in every direction. And then, at the edge of sight, something breaks that line. A dark shape, low, solid, an island. They row toward it. They are weeping with relief. They land. They drag their boat onto the shore. The surface beneath their feet is rough, uneven, dark, but it is solid. They light a fire to cook food and warm themselves. The fire catches. The flames spread. The surface begins to move. The island is alive. It is a creature, a vast ancient thing that has been floating at the surface for so long that sand and soil have accumulated on its back, that plants have taken root, that birds have nested. It is not an island. It is an Aspidochelone, literally a round shielded turtle. And when the fire heats its skin, it dives. And the sailors, their fire, their boat, and every hope they carried with them sink into the sea. The story appears in the Greek Physiologus, a 2nd century text. It appears in the Arabic Kitab al-Yahuan. It appears in Irish monastic literature. The story of Saint Brendan landing on the back of a whale called Jasconeus. It appears in Sinbad the Sailor. It appears in Japanese folklore, in Polynesian oral tradition, in the legends of the Caribbean. Every culture that sailed open water independently invented a story about an island that turned out to be an animal. The survival protocol embedded in the Aspidochelone story is straightforward. If you find an island that is not on any chart, that was not there yesterday, that no other sailor has reported, do not land on it. It may not be what it appears. In practical terms, this warning applied to several real hazards, partially submerged volcanic formations that could shift or collapse, floating pumice rafts from submarine eruptions that looked solid from a distance, but would not support weight, and yes, whales resting at the surface with barnacle-encrusted backs and seaweed trailing from their fins, large enough to be mistaken for a small island by exhausted men in low-profile boats. The story does not say do not land on uncharted geological formations. The story says the island is alive and it will drown you. The behavioral output is the same. The delivery mechanism is unforgettable. The common thread is this: every named monster is a compressed data package. The name itself is a file label. The physical description encodes the visual signature of the danger. The behavioral description encodes the mechanism. The story of how to survive the encounter encodes the protocol. A sailor who had never seen a whirlpool would not recognize one from a physical description. But a sailor who had been told about Charybdis, who had heard the story of how the monster swallows the sea and belches it back 3 times a day in a channel where the water spins, would recognize the danger instantly. The monster story produced a faster, more reliable recognition response than a technical description would have. The emotional charge of the story, the fear, the vividness, the narrative of men being dragged to their deaths ensured that the warning was never forgotten, never dismissed, never filed away as abstract knowledge. You forget a number, you forget a chart notation. You do not forget the name of the thing that ate your captain's brother. The fear was the user interface, the story was the technology, and the name was the index. The oldest entry in that index is 3,750 years old. It was pressed into wet clay in a city between 2 rivers. How does a Babylonian creation myth contain a fishing technique that matches a stone relief from a completely different century? We go back now, past Homer, past the Hebrew Bible, past the Norse sagas and the medieval bestiaries and every sea monster story you have ever heard. We go back 3,750 years to a city called Babylon, in a land between 2 rivers, where scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets, and left behind the oldest sea monster protocol in human history. The city was on the Euphrates in what is now central Iraq. In 1750 BCE, it was the largest city in the world, approximately 200,000 people, comparable to Rochester, New York today. It had walls, temples, canals, libraries, courts, markets, and a ziggurat that rose 300 feet above the Mesopotamian plain and was visible from 30 miles away. And it had a story about how the world began, a story that was also an instruction. The story is called the Eno Mahalish When on High, 7 tablets, approximately 1,000 lines. Composed sometime around 1750 BCE, discovered in the ruins of the library of Ashurbanipal in Ninhira in 1849, and translated over the following decades by George Smith. a self-taught Assyriologist who had started his career as an engraver of banknotes. In the beginning, says the Eno Mahelish, there was nothing but water. Not water as you understand it. Two waters. Tiamat, who was salt water, and Apsu, who was fresh water. They were mingled together in a vast, undifferentiated expanse, and from their mingling, the first gods were born. This is worth pausing on. The Babylonians lived in Mesopotamia. The word itself means between the rivers, in the flat, fertile plain between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Their entire civilization depended on the interaction between fresh water and salt water. The rivers brought fresh water from the mountains of Anatolia. The Persian Gulf pushed salt water inland through the marshes. Where those two waters met, the soil was rich enough to grow barley. And barley meant bread, and bread meant surplus, and surplus meant cities. The Babylonians looked at the most fundamental fact of their existence and said, that is how the universe began. With water mixing and the salt water, the vast, unpredictable, dangerous, life-giving sea was a goddess. And her name was Tiamat. The gods that Tiamat created were noisy. They disrupted the primordial silence. Apsu wanted to destroy them. Tiamat refused. They were her children. Apsu was killed by one of the younger gods, a clever deity named Ea, who put him into a magical sleep and slaughtered him. And this, the murder of her consort, pushed Tiamat beyond reason. She raised an army of monsters. The text describes them in a catalog of nightmares: serpents with sharp teeth, filled with venom instead of blood, dragons clothed in terror, scorpion men, fishmen, bullmen. 11 species of monster. She placed at the head of this army her new consort, Kingu, and she gave him the Tablet of Destinies, the artifact that controlled the fate of all creation. None of the elder gods could face her. They tried. They failed. Tiamat was the primordial sea itself. You cannot fight the ocean. You cannot stab a wave, until Marduk, young, brash. Powerful in a way the elder gods were not, his power came from storms. He volunteered to face Tiamat on one condition: if he won, he would be king of all the gods, forever. She opened her mouth to swallow him. He drove the winds into her throat. Her belly distended. She could not close her jaws. And while she choked on the storms he had forced inside her, Marduk shot an arrow through her open mouth that split her heart. He split her body in half like a shellfish. Her upper half became the sky, her lower half became the earth. Her eyes became the sources of the Tigris and the Euphrates. Her tears became the rain. The salt water that had been her blood became the sea. Think about what that means. In Babylonian cosmology, the world you stand on is the corpse of a sea monster. The sky is the other half of that corpse. The rivers flow from her eyes. The ocean is her blood. Every time it rains, Tiamat is still weeping. You live inside a dead goddess. And every time you drink water, you drink what remains of her. The Eno Mahalish was recited aloud every year during the Akitu festival, the New Year celebration, held in the spring when the Euphrates flooded. The high priest would stand in the temple of Marduk and read all 7 tablets, and the entire city would hear how their god defeated the sea and made the world from her body. This was not a bedtime story. It was a civic ritual, a national anthem in narrative form. And it was also, when you read it through the lens we have been building tonight, an annual refresher course in humanity's relationship with the ocean. The sea is alive. The sea is dangerous. The sea was a goddess who raised an army of monsters. The sea was defeated once by a god with a storm. But the sea's body is still here. It is the ground you stand on, the water you drink, the rain that feeds your crops. You live inside the monster. You are made of the monster. And if you forget what the monster was, if you forget the venom, the army, the open mouth, you will drown in the thing you thought was tame. For 12 centuries, every citizen of Babylon was reminded of this annually. That is longer than Christianity has existed. That is longer than the English language has existed. And the message, stripped of its mythology, is the same message that every maritime culture encoded in its monsters. The ocean is not your friend. Respect it, fear it, name it, and survive. Tiamat is the oldest named sea monster in written human history. She predates Leviathan by at least 1,000 years. She predates Scylla by at least 900. She is the original monster protocol, the first time a civilization compressed its entire relationship with the ocean into a story that could be told, retold, and transmitted without loss across generations. And there is a detail I almost did not include in this script, because it is speculative, because it crosses the line from history into hypothesis, but it is too striking to leave out. The way Marduk kills Tiamat by forcing wind into her mouth until she distends, and then piercing her with a projectile, is strikingly similar to the way ancient Mesopotamian fishermen killed large marine animals. They would drive sharp reeds into the blowholes of dolphins and porpoises, wait for the internal pressure to incapacitate the animal, and then spear it. Reliefs from the Palace of Sennacherib at Nineveh, dated to approximately 700 BCE, depict this technique. The Babylonian creation of the universe is a fishing story, scaled up to the size of everything. The Norse had a different story. Their monster did not need to be killed, it needed to be survived. What did they understand about the North Atlantic that modern oceanographers did not confirm until the 20th century? The world serpent enters Norse mythology through a family tree that reads like a list of catastrophes. Its father is Loki, the trickster god. Its mother is Angrboda, a giantess whose name means she who brings grief. Its siblings are Fenrir, the wolf who will swallow the sun, and Hel, the goddess who rules the dead. When the gods of Asgard learned what Loki had fathered, they disposed of the children. Hel was thrown into the underworld. Fenrir was bound with a magical chain forged from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain. And Jormungandr was hurled into the sea. It sank to the bottom, and then it grew. It grew until it encircled the entire earth. It grew until it could bite its own tail. And when it did, when the serpent completed the circle, the world was held together. Jormungandr was not just a monster, it was a structural element. Its body was the boundary between the known world and the void. Remove the serpent and the world has no edge, no limit, no containment. The most famous Jormungandr story is Thor's fishing trip, a story that begins as a joke and ends at the edge of the world. Thor disguises himself as a young man and goes fishing with a giant named Hymir. Thor uses an ox head as bait. He has decapitated one of Hymir's prized oxen without asking, which is the sort of thing Thor does, and he casts the line into the deepest part of the ocean. Hymir protests. "That water is too deep," he says. "You do not know what lives down there." Something takes the bait. The line goes taut. The boat tips. The ocean begins to churn, not waves but a disturbance from below, as if the seafloor itself is shifting. Thor braces his feet against the bottom of the boat so hard that his feet punch through the hull, and he is standing on the ocean floor, hauling the line with both hands. What rises from the deep is the head of Jormungandr. The serpent's mouth is open, the ox head is visible between its teeth. Tiny, absurd, a snack offered to something that could swallow a continent. Venom drips from its fangs. The venom hits the water and the water hisses. Its eyes, the prose Edda says, stare at Thor with a hatred that has been building since the day Odin threw it into the sea. Thor raises his hammer. He is going to kill the world serpent 1,000 years before it is supposed to happen. Hymir cuts the line. The serpent sinks. Thor, incandescent with rage, punches Hymir so hard that the giant flies out of the boat. Thor wades to shore because the boat is now in pieces and storms home. The world does not end. Not yet, because in Norse cosmology, you do not kill the thing that holds the world together just because you have the strength to. Hymir, the cautious one, the frightened one, the one who cut the line, is not a coward. He is the voice of the system. The monster protocol says, do not fight what you cannot control. Do not provoke what sustains you. Fish carefully. Cross the deep water carefully. And when you feel the serpent pulling at your line, cut it loose. Here is the geological feature I promised would explain all of this. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is an underwater mountain range that runs from the Arctic to the Antarctic down the center of the Atlantic Ocean. It is 10,000 miles long, longer than the Andes, the Rockies, and the Himalayas combined. It was formed by tectonic plates pulling apart, and it is still growing, still pushing the continents at a rate of about 1 inch per year. The ridge rises 5,000 to 10,000 feet above the surrounding ocean floor. In places, it breaks the surface. Iceland is the most visible section, an island that is literally the back of the serpent. The ridge produces volcanic activity, hydrothermal vents, earthquakes, and thermal upwelling that affects surface currents for hundreds of miles. The Norse did not have sonar or submersibles, but they were the greatest seafaring culture of the medieval world, and they had been crossing the North Atlantic for centuries, from Scandinavia to Iceland to Greenland to Newfoundland. They knew the ocean floor was not flat. They could feel it in the behavior of the currents, in the strange upwelling of warm water in certain places, in the volcanic activity that broke the surface at Iceland, and sent tremors through the water. They could feel that something ran beneath the Atlantic like a spine. They could not see it. They could not measure it. And so they gave it a body and a name and a story. And the story of a serpent that encircles the world and holds it together, encoded a navigational reality. There is a continuous geological feature running beneath the Atlantic that affects currents, produces volcanic hazards, and marks the boundary of the known world. The most famous Jormungandr story is Thor's fishing trip, and it is, beneath its mythological surface, a parable about the danger of confronting what you cannot control. Thor hooks the world serpent with an ox head on a deep line. He hauls it to the surface. The ocean boils. The boat breaks apart. His companion, the giant Hymir, screams in terror. And Hymir cuts the line. Thor is furious. He wanted to kill the serpent. He wanted to end the threat. But the story says he cannot, not yet, not here, not on a fishing trip. The world is not ready. Kill the serpent and the world ends. That is the lesson. You do not fight the ocean. You do not provoke what holds the world together. You fish in it carefully. You cross it carefully. You respect the thing beneath the surface that is larger than you, and has been here longer and will be here after you are gone. Hymir cuts the line. The serpent sinks. The world holds. The Norse told this story for centuries. The lesson never changed. You cannot kill the serpent. You can only survive it. At Ragnarok, the end of the world, Jormungandr will release its tail. The sea will flood the land. Thor will strike the serpent with his hammer and crack its skull. The serpent will die. And Thor will take 9 steps backward and fall dead, poisoned by the venom pouring from the creature's mouth. The god of thunder and the sea monster destroy each other simultaneously. That is how the Norse imagined the end, the strongest force in the universe, and the largest creature in the ocean, locked in mutual destruction. Neither survives. Think about what that says about the Norse relationship with the sea. They did not imagine conquering it. They did not imagine taming it. They imagined fighting it to a draw at the cost of everything, and even then, even with the strongest god they could invent, the outcome was mutual annihilation. The sea always wins. Or at best, the sea and the fighter destroy each other together. If you believe that story, if you carry it in your bones the way the Norse carried it, you do not approach the North Atlantic with arrogance. You approach it with the specific, calibrated respect of someone who knows that the thing beneath the surface is older than your gods and will outlast them. That is the monster protocol, not ignorance, not superstition, survival. But here is a question that has been nagging at me since I started this research. If the monster system was so effective, why did anyone believe the reports? What made a Roman senator take a Triton sighting seriously? In the 1st century CE, a delegation was sent to the Emperor Tiberius in Rome with unusual news. Multiple witnesses, citizens of good standing, men whose testimony would be accepted in a court of law, reported that they had seen a Triton in a cave on the coast. The Triton was playing a conch shell. It had been seen on multiple occasions by multiple observers. Pliny the Elder records this in Natural History, Book 9. He also records that the corpses of Nereids, sea creatures with human features, covered head to toe in fish scales, had washed ashore on the coast of Gaul. The governor of Gaul, a Roman official of considerable authority, wrote a letter to Emperor Augustus about the bodies. The governor was not a credulous fisherman telling tales in a harbor bar. He was the highest-ranking Roman official in the province, writing to the emperor, committing his reputation to the claim. In Rome itself, Marcus Scaurus exhibited a skeleton in the public arena that measured over 40 feet long, with a backbone a foot and a half thick. He claimed it was the Cetus from the Perseus and Andromeda myth, the sea monster that had terrorized the coast of Joppa in Judea before Perseus turned it to stone with the head of Medusa. The skeleton had been transported from Judea to Rome for public display. Thousands of Roman citizens saw it. What was it? We do not know. It may have been a whale skeleton. It may have been a composite, bones from multiple animals assembled to fit the expected shape. It may have been genuine and simply misidentified. What matters for our purposes is not what the skeleton was, but how the Romans evaluated the claim. This is the testimony problem, and it is the piece of the sea monster story that nobody talks about. Every video on this subject treats the ancient world as credulous, as if people simply believed whatever they were told. They did not. The Romans had courts. They had rules of evidence. They had a legal system built on the testimony of witnesses, and they had a sophisticated understanding of what made testimony credible. A sea monster sighting was evaluated the same way any other unusual claim was evaluated. The first question was, who is the witness? A harbor drunk telling stories for drinks was not credible. A ship captain with a reputation for competence was. A governor writing to an emperor was almost unchallengeable. The second question was specificity. A report that said, "I saw something large in the water" was not credible. A report that gave size, color, behavior, location, time of day, weather conditions, and the number of other witnesses was. The specificity itself was evidence. A fabricator invents broadly, while a genuine witness remembers precisely. The third question was consistency. Did this sighting match prior accounts from the same waters? If a dozen ships over a dozen years reported the same creature in the same stretch of sea? The cumulative weight of those reports became difficult to dismiss, regardless of what the creature actually was. And the fourth question, the most interesting one, was social risk. A sailor who reported a monster was making a public claim about his own experience. If believed, he was a reliable watchman whose observations deserved respect. If doubted, he was a lunatic or a liar, and his reputation, his ability to get hired for future voyages, his standing in his community, his reliability as a man whose word could be trusted, was destroyed. The social cost of a false report was severe. This meant that the reports that did survive, the ones that entered the collective record, the ones that Pliny thought worth including in a 37-volume encyclopedia of natural history, had already passed through a filter. They were not random fictions. They were accounts that had survived scrutiny by the community that produced them. In 1555, Olaus Magnus published the Historia de Gentibus Septentrionalibus, the history of the northern peoples, as a companion text to his Carta Marina. The book is a massive compendium of Scandinavian life, culture, and natural history, and it includes extensive accounts of sea creatures based on interviews with fishermen, sailors, and coastal residents. Olaus's method was careful. He cross-referenced accounts from different sources. He noted when multiple witnesses described the same creature independently. He distinguished between first-hand observation and hearsay. He was not, as later critics would claim, a credulous fool who believed every sailor's tale. He was a scholar doing fieldwork, and his fieldwork produced data that, when stripped of its mythological framework, maps with remarkable accuracy onto the real hydrographic hazards of northern European waters. But Olaus also understood something that modern debunkers often miss. The testimony itself, regardless of its literal accuracy, contained information. A sailor who reported a serpent 200 feet long in a specific stretch of water was not providing accurate zoological data. But he was providing navigational intelligence. Those waters are dangerous. Something happens there. Be careful. The collective mythology of a maritime community was not static, it was updated. When a new hazard was discovered, a previously unknown shoal, a change in tidal patterns, a new current that appeared after a submarine earthquake, the mythology incorporated the new data. A new creature appeared on the maps. A new story entered the oral tradition. The system was maintained and updated by the community of sailors who used it, in exactly the way a database is maintained by the users who depend on it. There is a question that the gap brief for this research identified as unanswered, one that I have been unable to find a definitive answer to. And I think the absence of the answer is itself revealing. The question is, did veteran sailors believe more or less? You would expect experience to erode belief. You would expect the man who had crossed the Mediterranean 30 times to dismiss the monsters that frightened the boy on his first voyage. But the evidence, fragmentary, circumstantial, drawn from the margins of ancient texts rather than their centers, suggests the opposite. The veterans were not less superstitious than the novices. They were more precise in their superstition. They did not abandon the monsters. They refined them. A veteran helmsman would not simply say, "There are monsters in the strait." He would say which monsters, in which season, at which phase of the tide, and what specific precautions to take. His belief was not the generalized fear of the unknown, it was the calibrated wariness of a man who had survived the specific thing he was warning you about. He had been through the strait. He had heard the barking, he had felt the current grab the hull, he had lost men. And he knew, from his own scarred experience, that the monster story was not false. It was the truest thing he knew about that water. This is the opposite of what modern debunkers assume. They assume that belief in sea monsters reflected ignorance, that the uneducated sailor, lacking scientific framework, defaulted to superstition. But the pattern runs the other way. The more experienced the sailor, the more detailed his monsters, the more crossings he survived, the more specific his warnings. The monsters did not come from ignorance. They came from data. But there is a part of this story that nobody covers, and it is the part that sits with me the most. The testimony problem, as I have described it, focuses on the community that receives the account, the credibility filters, the social cost of lying, the institutional mechanisms for evaluating claims. All of that is about the listener. What about the teller? Imagine the sailor on the beach. He is back. The voyage is over. He survived something in the water, something he felt through the hull, something he saw in the bioluminescence, something that surfaced 40 feet from the ship, and then went under and did not come back. His hands are still shaking. The memory is vivid but already unstable, the way traumatic memories are, sharp in their emotional texture, unreliable in their details. He knows what he felt. He does not know what he saw. And now he has to tell someone. He has to construct an account. He has to decide, how large was it? He is not sure. The dark distorts scale, and fear distorts it further. What color? He cannot say with confidence. What shape? Something long and ridged and dark, but whether it was a single creature or a wave catching the light or the back of something he has no name for, he does not know. He knows only that the lookout went silent, and the hull sang and something was there. So he reaches for the framework, the monster. The name his mentor gave him, Scylla or Cetus or Hafgufa, and the moment he names it, the experience becomes a story. The ambiguity hardens into narrative. The thing he is not sure about becomes the thing the community expects. And if he gets the story right, if the details match what other sailors have reported, if the location is plausible, if the behavioral description fits, then he is believed. And his account enters the collective record, and the map is updated, and the system works. And if he gets it wrong, if his description is too strange, too vague, too unlike what the framework predicts, then he is a liar or a coward or a man whose mind broke in the dark, and his career on ships is over. The survivor's interpretation problem is not just social, it is cognitive. It is the moment when a man who experienced something genuinely inexplicable must decide what to call it, knowing that the name he chooses will determine whether he is believed, whether his experience counts, whether the thing he survived becomes part of the collective knowledge, or dies with his reputation. Every monster sighting that entered the historical record passed through this moment, the sailor on the beach, composing his account, reaching for the name. I am genuinely curious what you think about this, whether the ancient testimony system was fundamentally different from our own, or whether we have simply replaced the governor of Gaul wrote to the emperor with the peer-reviewed paper was published in Nature. The mechanism of credibility has changed. The need for it has not, and the ancient system, for all its monsters, produced navigational intelligence that kept people alive for millennia. What I have not told you yet is that the monster system was not a single idea. It was a 5-component framework. What are those 5 components, and why does seeing them together change the way you think about ancient intelligence? In 1895, a retired sea captain named Joshua Slocum sailed alone around the world in a 36-foot sloop called the Spray. He was the first person to accomplish a solo circumnavigation, and his account of the voyage, Sailing Alone Around the World, published in 1900, remains one of the great documents of human endurance at sea. Midway through the Atlantic crossing, Slocum fell violently ill from eating bad cheese. Feverish and delirious, unable to stand at the tiller, he lashed the wheel and collapsed on the cabin floor. When he regained consciousness, he found the Spray still on course, still making headway, still sailing itself through heavy weather. And standing at the helm, Slocum reports, was a man. The man was dressed in the clothing of a 15th century sailor. He identified himself as the pilot of the Pinta, one of Columbus's 3 ships. He told Slocum to rest. He said he would guide the ship through the storm. And in the morning, when Slocum woke, the ship was on course, the storm had passed, and the phantom pilot was gone. Slocum was not insane. He was a meticulous navigator, a respected mariner, and a man of considerable practical intelligence. He knew, on some level, that the phantom pilot was a hallucination, a product of fever, isolation, sleep deprivation, and the specific psychological pressures of solo ocean sailing. He includes the episode in his book without apology and without excessive explanation. It happened. He experienced it. He survived. 73 years later, in 1968, Donald Crowhurst entered the Sunday Times Golden Globe race, the first solo non-stop around-the-world sailing race. Crowhurst was underqualified and underprepared. His trimaran was poorly built, his supplies were insufficient. Within weeks of departure, he realized he could not complete the voyage. He did not turn back. Instead, he began transmitting false position reports, claiming to be in the Southern Ocean while he was, in fact, sailing in circles in the South Atlantic. For months, he maintained the deception. His logbooks, found later, show a mind disintegrating in real time. The entries become increasingly fragmented, increasingly philosophical, increasingly detached from physical reality. He began writing in a private journal about cosmic consciousness and the nature of time. His trimaran, the Tinmouth Electron, was found drifting and abandoned on July 10, 1969. Crowhurst was never found. Bernard Moitessier, who competed in the same race as Crowhurst, sailed the opposite trajectory, not into madness, but into clarity. Moitessier was winning. He had rounded Cape Horn, He was leading the fleet. The finish line was within reach. And then he kept sailing. He abandoned the race, rounded the Cape a second time, and ended up in Tahiti. His stated reason, to save my soul, he had been alone on the ocean for months, and what he found there was not madness but a kind of peace. A relationship with the water that he did not want to interrupt by winning a race and returning to the world. Slocum found a phantom pilot. Crowhurst found oblivion. Moitessier found something between prayer and navigation. The contrast between these three sailors, Slocum, Crowhurst, and Moitessier, is the contrast between minds with different frameworks. Slocum hallucinated a phantom pilot and then went back to sailing. His mind produced a coping mechanism, a figure of authority who gave him permission to rest, and when the crisis passed, the mechanism was no longer needed and it dissolved. Crowhurst's mind, without a framework for the terror and isolation of the open ocean, spiraled into madness. The ancient sailor had the monster. The monster was the framework. It was the phantom pilot. It was the name you gave to the thing you could not explain, the container you put the terror in, so that the terror had a shape, and a shape has limits, and a thing with limits can be survived. The ancient sailor had all three possibilities, but the mythology gave him something that modern psychology has only recently understood, a predetermined response. He did not need to invent his framework in real time, alone on a dark ocean, with his mind dissolving. The framework was waiting for him. It had been built by every sailor before him, refined by every voyage, tested by every storm, and every crossing and every night watch in which a man heard the hull singing and did not go mad. The monster was the framework. The name was the anchor. The story was the predetermined response that activated the moment. The terror arrived. A nameless dread is infinite. It fills the entire ocean. It is the dark beneath the hull, and the sound in the water and the light that has no source and the weight on the chest that will not lift. A nameless dread cannot be fought because it has no edges. It cannot be avoided because it is everywhere. It cannot be survived because survival implies that the thing ends, and a nameless thing does not end. But a monster has a name. A monster lives in specific waters. A monster has behaviors. It feeds at certain times. It sleeps at others. It can be appeased with offerings or avoided with the correct course. A monster converts infinite dread into finite risk. And finite risk can be managed. This is where the thesis of tonight's entry comes together. The monster belief system was not superstition. It was, in the language of modern risk management, a complete hazard mitigation framework with 5 components. First, identification. Each named creature marked a specific hazard type. Charybdis meant whirlpool, tidal vortex, predictable cycle, total ship loss if entered. Scylla meant hydraulic cave effect, spray, surge, partial casualties, survivable with caution. The Kraken meant localized downwelling and the presence of large deep-water cephalopods, an area where the water behaves strangely, where things rise from below, where nets come back torn. Leviathan meant volcanic and hydrothermal activity, boiling water, sulfurous gas, surface fire. The sirens meant acoustic hazard near a rocky coast, sounds that carry across the water and draw you toward the rocks if you steer toward them instead of away. Each name was a hazard classification. The monster was the category. The specific details, 6 heads, 3 rows of teeth, a voice like barking dogs, were the identifying features that let a sailor recognize the hazard type when he encountered it. Second, localization. The monsters did not roam. This is critical. They were not described as nomadic predators that could appear anywhere. They lived in specific waters. Scylla lived in the Strait of Messina. The Kraken lived off the coast of Norway. Leviathan lived in the deep eastern Mediterranean. The sirens lived near specific rocky coastlines. This geographic specificity gave sailors what a modern navigator would call a hazard overlay, a map layer that specified not just that dangers existed, but exactly where they were most acute. Third, behavioral prediction. Each monster had known behaviors, feeding times, activity cycles, seasonal patterns. Charybdis swallowed the sea 3 times a day. The Kraken surfaced in specific conditions. The Luska was most dangerous during tidal change. These behavioral patterns encoded the real periodicity of the natural hazards they represented: tidal cycles, volcanic activity rhythms, seasonal current patterns, and the migration schedules of large marine animals. A sailor who knew the monster's schedule knew the hazard schedule. Fourth, protocol. Each monster came with a survival procedure embedded in its story. Steer toward Scylla, not Charybdis, accept limited casualties to avoid total loss. Give the umebozu a bottomless barrel, bail immediately using a container with drainage. Do not look at the sirens, plug your ears and maintain course past the rocky coast. Cut the line when you hook the serpent. Do not fight what you cannot control. Tie yourself to the mast, secure yourself before entering dangerous waters. These were not poetic flourishes. They were specific, actionable instructions disguised as plot points. And fifth, the most elegant component, emotional encoding. The stories were frightening. They were designed to be frightening. A technical manual can be forgotten. A chart notation can be overlooked. A number can be transposed. But a story about a creature that ate 6 men while they screamed your captain's name is not something you forget. The fear was not a side effect of the mythology. It was the delivery mechanism, the encryption that ensured the data would be transmitted without loss, without dilution, without the slow erosion of relevance that makes technical information disposable. A sailor who reads a chart notation that says strong currents may or may not remember it. A sailor who has been told about Charybdis, who has heard the story of how the monster swallowed an entire ship while the crew screamed, will remember it for the rest of his life. And when he teaches his apprentice, the apprentice will remember it too. And so will the apprentice's apprentice, for centuries, without writing, without instruments, without institutional memory of any kind except the story itself. That is not superstition. That is information architecture. The modern sailor who crosses the Strait of Messina has a GPS unit, a depth sounder, a radar display, an engine, a steel hull, and a radio to call for help. The ancient sailor who crossed the same strait had Scylla and Charybdis. Both are navigation systems. Both encode the same information: where the danger is, how it behaves, and what to do about it. The modern system is more precise. The ancient system was more memorable. We call theirs superstition. They would have called ours magic. The function is the same. And the function is still being validated. What did a team of Japanese researchers find in 2004 when they lowered a camera 3,000 feet into black water? A creature that had been in the monster catalog for 2,000 years? In September of 2004, a team of Japanese researchers from the National Science Museum in Tokyo lowered a camera on a 3,000-foot line into the black water north of the Ogasawara Islands. They had been trying to film a giant squid alive for 5 years. The creature had been known to science since 1857, when a Danish zoologist named Japetus Steenstrup gave it a Latin name, Architeuthis dux, the ruling squid. But in nearly 150 years, not a single living specimen had been photographed. The only proof of its existence came from corpses, rotting tentacles tangled in fishing nets, severed arms found inside the stomachs of sperm whales. A 43-foot carcass that washed ashore in Newfoundland in 1878 and was measured by a minister named Moses Harvey, who draped the tentacles over his bathtub because he did not have a surface long enough to lay the creature out flat. At 2,950 feet, in water so dark that no sunlight had touched it in 4.5 billion years, something moved. It was 26 feet long. It attacked the camera rig with 2 feeding tentacles lined with serrated suckers, each one ringed with teeth made of chitin. It fought the line for 4 hours and 18 minutes. When it tore itself free, it left behind a single severed tentacle, 18 feet long, still writhing on the ocean floor. The suckers were still trying to grip when the team hauled it to the surface. The footage confirmed what sailors had been saying for 2,000 years. Something lives in the deep ocean. It is real. It is large enough to drag things down, and it is not the only thing. On its close relative, the colossal squid, Aspidochelone hamiltoni, discovered in 1925, and not filmed alive until 2007. The suckers are replaced by rotating hooks. The hooks swivel on a joint, like a cat's retractable claw. The largest specimen ever captured, caught by a New Zealand fishing vessel in the Ross Sea while it was feeding on a hooked Patagonian toothfish, weighed 1,091 pounds and was 33 feet long. Its beak, the hard structure at the center of its arms, was large enough to fit a human fist inside, and strong enough to cut through braided steel cable. When preserved at the Museum of New Zealand, the curators discovered its stomach contained a second, smaller squid, a cannibal, eating its own kind. 3,000 feet below the surface of the Antarctic. These are not hypothetical measurements. These are documented, peer-reviewed, confirmed. The giant squid was not discovered by scientists. It was discovered by fishermen, Norse fishermen. In the exact waters where Kraken stories had been told for a millennium. The giant squid's eyes are the largest of any known animal, up to 11 inches in diameter, the size of a dinner plate. These eyes evolved to detect bioluminescence in total darkness. When a sperm whale descends to hunt, the organisms in the water column fire their bioluminescent alarms. The water lights up in scattered flashes, and the giant squid, with those dinner plate eyes, reads the panic of smaller creatures from hundreds of feet away. It sees by reading the fear of other animals. It navigates a world without light by interpreting panic. That is not a metaphor. Norse fishermen had been finding sucker marks on their hulls for centuries, circular welts, each ringed with tooth marks, pressed into the wood by something strong enough to grip a ship's keel in the dark. They had been pulling up tentacles in their nets. They had seen arms break the surface, thick, muscular, ringed with those terrible suckers, reaching for the deck and then recoiling back into the water. The first scientifically documented specimen was a beak found in the stomach of a shark off the coast of Denmark in 1853. But the fishermen had the data centuries before the scientists had the vocabulary. They were not wrong. They were witnesses. And the Kraken story, the story of a creature in the deep water off Norway with arms long enough to reach a ship's deck, produced a specific behavioral response that was precisely correct for the actual hazard. Fishermen who believed in the Kraken avoided certain channels at certain times. They did not anchor over deep water at night. They checked their hulls for sucker marks the way a modern sailor checks for barnacle damage, as diagnostic evidence of what had been near the ship while the crew slept. The story was wrong about the shape. The Kraken of mythology is a creature the size of an island, with arms that can wrap around a sailing vessel and drag it beneath the surface. The giant squid, in reality, is 40 to 60 feet long, large, but not island-sized. It is more likely to investigate a ship than attack one. But the behavioral response the story produced, heightened alertness in deep water, avoidance of known squid territory, careful inspection of the hull, was the correct response to the presence of a large, unpredictable deep-water predator. The precision was in the protocol, not in the portrait. The oarfish Regalicus glez is the longest bony fish in the ocean, up to 36 feet. Ribbon-shaped, silver with a crest of elongated dorsal rays streaming behind it like a red mane. It surfaces only when sick, dying, or driven up by seismic activity. Japanese folklore calls it Ri-Ugunatsuki, the messenger from the dragon god's palace, and associates its appearance with imminent earthquakes. When the oarfish surfaces, it moves in slow vertical undulations, its silver body catching whatever light is available, its red crest streaming behind it like a wound. To a sailor who has never seen anything like it, the oarfish is a sea serpent, period. Rogue waves were dismissed as exaggeration until January 1, 1995, When the Draupner oil platform in the North Sea recorded a wave 85.3 feet tall in a sea state where the average wave height was 39 feet. A wave more than twice the height of the surrounding sea, appearing from nowhere, striking the platform and vanishing. The physics is called constructive interference, multiple smaller waves combining into a single wave far larger than any of its components. A rogue wave hitting an ancient ship would have been an extinction event for everyone aboard. And because it appears without warning in otherwise calm seas, the experience would have seemed not dangerous but intentional. Something reached up and killed us. Whale falls. When a whale dies and sinks, its carcass creates an ecosystem on the ocean floor that persists for decades, 40,000 individual organisms feeding on a single body. Ancient divers who descended 60, 80, 100 feet on a single breath would occasionally encounter the upper edges of these skeletal ecosystems. A rib cage the size of a house, draped in organisms they had no names for, glowing faintly with bioluminescence. What would you call that if you had no word for whale fall? You would call it a monster, a dead one, and you would wonder about the living ones. Here is the catalog, stripped of mythology, a 43-foot squid with rotating hooks, living at 3,000 feet, a 36-foot silverfish with a red mane. Whirlpools from tidal forces and underwater topography, hydrothermal vents that boil the sea from below, rogue waves 85 feet tall in moderate seas, whale carcasses that glow in the deep, bioluminescent organisms that set the water on fire, and infrasonic vibrations from the ocean floor that cause hallucinations, dread, and the unshakable conviction that something is watching. All of it real, all of it documented, all of it happening right now in waters that look calm from the shore. The ancient mind did not have marine biology or oceanography or fluid dynamics. It had stories, and the stories were right about almost everything except the shape. Which brings us to the deepest water on Earth, and the uncomfortable question, what did we lose when we stopped believing? The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean, east of the Mariana Islands, roughly 1,500 miles southeast of Japan. It is a crescent-shaped scar in the ocean floor, 1,580 miles long, formed by the Pacific Plate sliding beneath the Mariana Plate at a rate of 3.4 inches per year. It has been doing this for 50 million years. At its deepest point, a slot called the Challenger Deep, named for the HMS Challenger expedition, that first sounded it in 1875 using a weighted rope. The trench reaches 36,070 feet below sea level. That is 683 miles, straight down. If you took Mount Everest and dropped it into the Challenger Deep, the peak would still be more than a mile underwater. 3 people have been to the bottom. In 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh descended in the bathyscaphe Trieste and spent 20 minutes on the floor of the Challenger Deep. In 2012, James Cameron made the trip alone in the deep-sea Challenger and spent 3 hours filming. In 2019, Victor Vescovo reached a point 52 feet deeper than Piccard, and Walsh in the submersible limiting factor. 3 people in the history of the species. At the bottom of the deepest water on Earth, more humans have walked on the surface of the moon. This is the number that makes me pause when I think about what the ancient sailors knew. We have mapped the surface of Mars in greater detail than the floor of our own ocean. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, more than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored. The latest estimates suggest that 91% of marine species have not been classified. New species are discovered in the deep ocean every year, and the rate of discovery is accelerating, not because there are more creatures, but because we are finally building the technology to look. This is not a suspenseful aside. We literally do not know what lives in the deep ocean. The ancient sailors, standing on their wooden decks above 2 miles of black water, knew something that modern confidence has made us forget. The ocean is not safe just because you can explain some of it. We traded the monster map for the bathymetric chart. We gained precision. We gained prediction. We gained the ability to cross the Atlantic in a container ship without losing a single sailor to a Charybdis, or a Scylla, or a Kraken. But we lost something too. We lost the respect. We lost the calibrated fear that made ancient mariners approach the open ocean, the way you approach a sleeping animal, carefully, quietly, with the understanding that the thing you are crossing is alive and indifferent and vastly more powerful than you. The Titanic struck an iceberg in waters where the Norse had placed ice monsters on their maps for centuries. The monster's message was simple: these waters will freeze you. These waters will break you. Approach with the respect you give to something that can kill you without effort. The Titanic approached with 46,000 tons of confidence, and a navigation system that could plot its course to within a nautical mile, but could not see a 100-foot wall of ice until it was too late. The ancient sailor, crossing the same water in a 60-foot longship, would have been watching for the monsters. He would have been listening. He would have been reading the water temperature through the hull. Yes, through the hull. Because an experienced Norse sailor could feel the temperature change in the wood when the ship entered a cold current, and cold currents near Greenland meant ice. His monster map was not precise, but it was humble, and the humility was the technology. I have spent weeks in this particular corner of history, and what I keep coming back to is not the monsters. It is the system, the elegance of it. The way completely independent civilizations, Babylonians and Greeks, Norse and Japanese, Hebrews and Polynesians, Caribbeans and Micronesians, all arrived at the same solution to the same problem. Or did they arrive independently? This is a question I have not been able to answer definitively, and the uncertainty is itself revealing. The Phoenicians traded at every port in the Mediterranean and beyond the Pillars of Heracles into the Atlantic. Greek merchants sailed to Phoenician harbors. Norse traders reached Constantinople. The ancient ports Tyre, Piraeus, Massalia, Gades, Alexandria were not isolated endpoints. They were nodes in a network where sailors from different civilizations drank together, waited out weather together, told stories together. Did the Phoenician sailor waiting for a wind shift in the harbor at Syracuse share his monsters with the Greek oarsman repairing his ship at the next berth? Did the Norse trader who reached the Black Sea via the river routes bring the Hafgufa into waters that already had their own Ketos? We know the port cities were multilingual. We know sailors adopted each other's navigational techniques. It would be strange if they did not also adopt each other's warnings. Some of the convergence in the monster maps may not be independent invention at all. It may be transmission, danger knowledge passing from one maritime culture to another at the harbors where their routes intersected, the monsters evolving as they traveled, picking up new names and new details at every port. The problem was, the ocean is dangerous and we do not have instruments. The solution was, name the dangers, give them bodies, give them behaviors. Give them stories that are frightening enough to be remembered and specific enough to be useful. Encode the navigational intelligence of 1,000 voyages into a mythology that can be transmitted orally, without charts, without writing, without instruments, from one generation to the next without loss. And it worked. For thousands of years across every ocean, in every maritime culture that left a record, the monster system worked. Sailors who believed survived at higher rates than sailors who did not, because belief produced the correct behavioral response to real dangers: caution, preparation, specific course corrections, and the fundamental humility of knowing that the ocean contains things you do not understand and cannot control. Randolph Nessie's smoke detector, sounding the alarm, every day, for 3,000 years. If you had been standing on that night watch, if you had felt the hull singing and seen the water burning and heard the lookout go silent, would you have called it a monster? Of course you would have. And you would have been more right than you knew, because the monster was never wrong about the danger. It was wrong about the shape. It was wrong about the number of heads and the length of the tentacles and the specific mechanism by which the whirlpool swallowed ships. But it was right about the thing that mattered, where the danger was, how serious it was, and what to do about it. We have better shapes now. We have sonar and submersibles and satellite imagery. We can map the Moskströmmen to the centimeter and predict the tidal race to the minute. We can explain the Garofalo whirlpool with computational fluid dynamics and the barking caves with acoustic modeling. We can identify the oarfish and the giant squid and the bioluminescent bacteria and the infrasonic vibrations from the mid-ocean ridge. But the ancient sailors did not have shapes. They had stories, and the stories worked. That is the impossibility. Not the monsters themselves, but the fact that a system built on fiction produced the same survival outcomes as a system built on fact. The Greek sailor who believed in Scylla and Charybdis survived the Strait of Messina at the same rate as the modern mariner who believes in tidal dynamics and hydrographic charts. The mechanism is different. The outcome is the same. The monsters were not superstition. They were the most elegant risk management system ever devised by a civilization without instruments. And the proof is simple. The civilizations that had them survived. The sailors who believed in them came home. And if that were the end of the story, it would be enough. But it is not the end. Because the monster system did not die with the ancient world. It happened again, once more, in the 20th century. And this time we have the date. On March 1st, 1954, a Japanese tuna fishing boat called the Daigo Fukuryumahiro, the Lucky Dragon No. 5, was working the Pacific Ocean near the Marshall Islands. There were 23 men aboard. They were 80 miles outside the danger zone that the United States military had marked around Bikini Atoll, where a thermonuclear weapon test called Castle Bravo was scheduled for that morning. The bomb was 15 megatons, 2.5 times larger than predicted. The fallout drifted east, over the ocean, over the fishing grounds, over the Lucky Dragon. Within hours, the crew's skin began to blister. Their hair fell out. A white ash settled on the deck and would not wash away. Crew member Eikichi Kuboyama died 7 months later. He was 40 years old. Japan, 9 years after Hiroshima, 9 years after Nagasaki, had been struck by radiation from the sea. Again, the ocean itself had become the weapon. 8 months after the Lucky Dragon incident, a film opened in Tokyo. In its first scene, a fishing boat is destroyed by something rising from the deep. The boat has a number 5 on its life preserver. The creature that destroys it is enormous, amphibious, ancient, a prehistoric thing awakened and transformed by nuclear radiation, rising from the ocean floor to deliver a judgment that looks, from the shore, indistinguishable from a natural disaster. They called it Gojira. The name is a combination of 2 Japanese words, gorira, gorilla, and Kujira whale, a creature half land, half sea. The audience understood immediately what it was. Not entertainment, not fantasy, processing. The same thing the Kraken had been for the Norse. The same thing Scylla had been for the Greeks. The same thing Tiamat had been for the Babylonians. A culture encountering a danger from the ocean that it could not control, and encoding that danger into a creature with a name and a shape and a story, because a thing with a name can be survived. And a thing without a name is just dread. The Japanese already had a sea monster for this, Umebozu, the shadowy giant that rises from calm water and capsizes ships. Ryujin, the dragon king of the sea who controls storms. These were ancient. These were the same system we have been talking about all night. But the danger in 1954 was new. It was nuclear. It required a new monster, one that carried the old pattern but held the new fear. Gojira was that monster. And the mechanism was identical to the one the Babylonians used 37 centuries earlier. Take the danger, give it a body, give it a story, make the story frightening enough to remember. And in the remembering, encode the warning. The ocean contains forces that are older and more powerful than anything you have built, and the correct response is not confidence, it is respect. 3,000 years. Same species, same ocean, same solution. The ancient Greek sailor named the thing beneath his hull because naming it was the only technology he had. The Japanese filmmaker named the thing in the Pacific because naming it was the only way to make it survivable. The sailors came home. The audiences left the theater. The system worked both times. This is the impossibility I keep returning to, not the monsters, the pattern. The fact that human beings, separated by millennia, facing completely different dangers from the same ocean, independently arrived at the same cognitive tool. Give the danger a shape. Give the shape a name. Give the name a story, and let the story carry the warning forward, from one generation to the next, without loss. The monsters change. The names change. The ocean does not. For the next entry in the archive, I have been exploring something I have never covered before, a civilization that should not have been able to cross the largest ocean on Earth using nothing but the stars and the shape of the waves and the flight patterns of birds. But that is for another night. Tonight, we return to where we began, to the ship, to the watch, to the second hour past midnight on a Roman merchant vessel, 4 days from shore, the hull singing, the water burning, the stars wheeling overhead in a sky so vast and so dark that the difference between the sea and the sky disappears and you are floating in a sphere of black. The thing alongside the hull has moved on. You do not know what it was. You will never know. But you have a name for it now, one of the names, one of the many names that the sailors before you built for exactly this moment, and the name sits in your mind like ballast, steadying the ship of your thoughts against the rolling dread. A thing with a name can be reasoned with. A thing with a name has limits. A thing with a name can be survived. The Phoenicians had names for the things in the Western Mediterranean. The Greeks had different names for the same things in the Eastern Aegean. The Egyptians had names for the creatures in the Nile Delta, where the fresh water met the sea, where Tiamat's blood still mixed with Apsu's tears. The Chinese had names for the dragons in the South China Sea. The Polynesians had names for the Tanifa that guarded the passages between islands, and the Tanifa names mapped, with startling precision, to the actual locations of dangerous currents, submerged reefs, and ripped tides in the waters around New Zealand. Every culture, every ocean, the same solution. Name the thing, give the thing a story. Make the story frightening enough that no one forgets it. And in the telling, encode the survival protocol, the course to steer, the waters to avoid, the time of day when the danger is worst, the offerings that mark the moment of maximum vigilance. The monster was never just a monster. It was a filing system. It was a search engine. It was the compressed intelligence of 1,000 voyages, transmitted without loss from father to son, from captain to apprentice, from the dying sailor on the beach to the young one who would take his place on the rail. And now, tonight, 3,000 years later, you are lying somewhere warm and safe, and the names are still here. The system is still working. It is telling you the story of the ocean, and the story is carrying you into sleep, and the sleep is a kind of crossing, a night watch of your own, a passage through the dark toward the morning. The monsters will keep watch while you rest. The bioluminescence is fading. The bow wave still glows, but the intensity has dropped. The concentration of dinoflagellates is thinning as the ship moves into new water. The trail of light behind the ship stretches further now, dimmer, the cold fire pulling apart into scattered points, like stars reflected in the surface of the sea. Or stars seen from the bottom of the sea, indistinguishable from the real ones above you. The sound from the hull has changed. The moan has resolved into something lower, something slower, something that is no longer a voice, but a rhythm, a pulse, distant, repetitive. Like the breathing of something so large that each breath takes 30 seconds, and the silence between breaths is longer than you can hold yours. It is moving away. You can feel this in your feet, the vibration diminishing, the hull settling back into its ordinary creaking, the ship becoming a ship again instead of an instrument. Demetrios is still beside you. He has not spoken. Neither have you. There is a kind of conversation that happens on the night watch that does not require words, a mutual acknowledgement that something passed, something was present, something was felt by both of you, and neither of you can explain it, and neither of you needs to, because you both have the same name for it, and the name is enough. The stars have shifted. You can see Polaris through the gap between the mast and the shroud. The ship is on course. The helmsman is awake. The grain in the hold is still dry. The hull is intact. The crew is sleeping below deck, 30 men in a space the size of a modern living room, curled on their sides, their breathing slow. Their dreams populated by the same creatures that populate the ocean they are crossing, because the stories are the same stories, and the fears are the same fears, and the names are the same names, carried from Babylon to Greece to Rome to everywhere that humans pushed a wooden boat into water they could not see the bottom of. The watch is not over. You have 3 more hours before the dawn. 3 more hours of dark water and glowing wake, and the hull's low conversation with whatever passes beneath it. But the terror has settled. It has a shape now. It has a name, and a thing with a name, you have been told, by men who survived long enough to tell you, can be weathered. The water is calmer now. The wind has shifted slightly. You can feel it on your left cheek, cooler than before, carrying the faintest salt mineral smell of deep ocean, of water that has not touched land in 1,000 miles. The ship adjusts. The sail fills. The wake brightens briefly as the hull changes angle and disturbs a fresh patch of plankton, and then the glow settles again into its steady, quiet radiance. Some of you are drifting off by now. Good. That is exactly what this is for. The story will be here when you come back. The ocean is old. It is older than every civilization that has ever named a monster in it. It is older than the continents. It is older than the mountains and the rivers and the ice. It was here before the first cell divided, and it will be here after the last fire goes out. And in its depths, in the black water below the thermocline, in the trenches and the vents and the abyssal plains where the pressure alone would crush anything that was not designed from the cellular level to survive it, things live. Things we have not named yet, things we have not seen yet, things that the ancient sailors sensed through the hull of their ships and gave the only kind of name they could. You do not need to name them tonight. You do not need to fear them tonight. Tonight, the names are enough. The system works. The fear has a shape, and the shape has limits, and the limits mean that the world is knowable, survivable, navigable, even in the dark, even at 2 in the morning. Even with 2 miles of water beneath you, and nothing between you and the stars but the mast and the shroud and the slow, steady breathing of a ship that has been crossing this ocean since before you were born. The hull creaks, the water whispers. The watch continues as it has continued for 3,000 years, on ships that were built for exactly this, to carry people through the dark, across the deep, past the things that live in it, to the other side. The monsters are still there, beneath the surface, in the cold water, in the silence between the waves. But so are the names, and the names have always been enough. The morning will come, the sun will rise. The water will turn from black to blue to the green of the shallows as the ship approaches the coast. The bioluminescence will fade, it always fades with the light, the dinoflagellates retreating into their chemical silence until the next night, the next disturbance. The next bow wave pulls their cold fire from the surface. The whale song will diminish. The whale is moving south or west or deeper, following its own ancient route, a migration path older than any civilization that has ever named it, a journey it makes without charts or stars or names. Because it does not need them. The sea itself is its chart. The magnetic field is its compass. The temperature gradient is its map. The ocean knows where everything is. The hull is quiet now. The ordinary creaking has returned, the sound you have learned to ignore, the sound that means the ship is working, the joints shifting, the ribs flexing, the keel doing what keels do. It is the sound of a machine functioning, not the voice of a creature, not the moan of something beneath the waterline, just a ship, made of wood, carrying grain across the sea. But you will remember the other sound, the one that came from deeper, the one that entered your bones before it reached your ears. You will remember it when you reach port, when you step onto solid ground for the first time in days, when the earth does not move beneath your feet, and the silence is so loud it is almost painful. You will remember it, and you will tell someone, Demetrios, or the old helmsman, or the boy who joins the crew next season and has never been out of sight of land. You will tell him the name. Because someone told you, because someone told them. Because the chain of names stretches back 3,000 years, from this watch to the one before it, from that watch to the one before that, all the way back to the first sailor who stood on the first ship in the first dark hour and heard the ocean speak and did not go mad because he had a word for what he was hearing. The stars are shifting westward. The first gray is appearing in the east, not light yet, not dawn, but the memory of light. The darkness losing its absolute quality, becoming a darkness you can see through, a darkness with depth instead of flatness. The horizon is returning. The line between sea and sky is re-establishing itself, and with it, the geometry of the world. Up, down, forward, backward, shore. The concepts that the night watch dissolves and the dawn restores. You are tired. The cold is in your hands and your feet and the small of your back where the wind has been pressing for hours. Your eyes are gritty. Your mind is slow. But you are alive. The ship is intact. The crew is sleeping. The grain is dry. And the watch is almost over. The sea breathes. The hull breathes. The world turns. Somewhere beneath the keel, far below, in the black water, in the silence, in the cold, the monsters are still there. They have always been there. They will be there after you are gone, and after your children are gone, and after the name of your ship is forgotten, and the grain you carry has been bread and crumb and dust and earth and grain again 1,000 times. They do not need you to believe in them. They do not need you to name them. They do not need your fear or your respect or your stories. But you needed theirs, and they gave it to you. And because of what they gave you, the names, the stories, the calibrated fear that told you where the danger was and how to survive it, you made it through the night. The watch ends. You may rest. JSON words corbita, corbita, pentaconter, pentaconter, Charybdis, Charybdis, Scylla, Scylla, Messina, Messina, Calabria, Calabria. Garo Hafalo, Garo Hafalo, Moskstromen, Moskstromen, Korevrakan, Korevrakan, Apollonius, Apollonius, Lestrigonia, Lestrigonia. Tiamat, T-A-Amat Enumahelish, Ashurbanipal, 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 Ninwe, Nineheve, Marduk, Marduk, Mergingjord. Yarngrapir, Yarngraper, Jormungandr, Jormungandr, Ahangerboda, Ahangerboda, Fenrir, Fenrir, Ragnarok, Ragnarok, Vigrither, Vigrither, Mylnir, Mylnir, Voluspa, Voluspa, Nachfar, Nachfar, Architeuthis, Architeuthis, Mesonicoteuthis, Mesonicoteuthis, Regalekus, Regalekus, Dinophlagia hlates, Luciferin, Luciferin, Umiabozu, Umibozu, Hafgufa, Hafgufa, Ketos, Ketos, Hemir, Hemir, Cetus, Cetus. Luska, Luska, Triest, Tri est, Batiskyph, Batiskyph, Deep Sea Challenger, Deep Sea Challenger, Veskovo, Veskovo, Slocum, Slocum, Crowhurst, Crowhurst. Tinmuth, Tinni, Tandi, Nessie, Nessie, Ryogunotsuki, Ryogunotsuki, Olaus Magnus, Olaus Magnus, Akitu, Akitu. Ouroboros, Urob or Os. Portolan, Thermocline, Thermocline, Snorrius Turlucin, Snor Easter Lucen, Kybernetes, Anzimenes, Anzim Enes, Titus Livius, Titus Livius, Aspidochelone, Aspidochelone, Physiologus, Physiologos, Jasconius, Jasconeus, Tanifa, Kuroshio, Brendan, Sinbad, Kita Balyahuan, Kitab al-Hayawan, Muatca, Gojira, Gorira, Kujira, Digofugor Yumaharu, Kuboyama, Aikichi, Ryujin, Bikine, chapter title Est. Words Est. Duration, the absolute value of dew for 204:15:17. 2. The smoke detector of the ancient sea, 2113:23. 3. The strait where monsters live, 2214:01. 4. The fear map, 2415:17. 5. What the hull told you at night, 2817:50. 6. The naming, 2214. 1. The 7 Tiamat. The first monster protocol, the Absolar 2113:23. 8. The serpent's spine, 2314:39. 9. The testimony problem, 2415:17. 10. The Kraken protocol equals 2817:50. 11. What the deep produces, 1912 equals 813:50. 11. What the deep produces, 1912 equals 06. Test 12. The knowledge we lost, 1811:28. 13. The watch ends, 1811:28. Total 18,846. Narration Equalitude 001. Opening Ch1. Every ancient civilization that put a boat on water developed the same behavioral response, not to fight the unknown, but to name it. That response kept them alive. 2. First return Ch4. Modern oceanographers have overlaid medieval monster maps with hydrographic charts. The correlation is striking. The monsters mark the dangers. 3. Midpoint 218. The monster belief system was not superstition. It was a complete hazard mitigation framework with 5 components. 4. Pre-resolution Ch12. The ancient sailors knew something that modern confidence has made us forget. The ocean is not safe just because you can explain some of it. X cold open, no sonic logo, brand intro at Ch2 open, X impossibility spine. 4 anchors across script. X, think about that. 4 uses Ch.3, Ch.5, Ch.7, Ch.8 minus X, we'll come back to that. 2 promises in first chapter, hull sound. Bioluminescence both resolved, X curator's confession. 2x to 6 I keep coming back to, TA12 I have spent weeks, X almost didn't include, 1x, Ch.7 Tiamat fishing technique, Nidus X direct viewer question, 2x, Ch.9 genuinely curious what you think, Ch12 would you have called it a monster, X share what's coming next. 1x13, Polynesian Wayfinders tease, minus X acknowledge format, 1x13, some of you are drifting off by now, minus x88/12 rule. Ch112 history, 88%, Ch13 dissolution, right 12% minus x, no exclamation points, minus x no banned words, delve, tapestry nestled, moreover. Furthermore, X science impossibility framing throughout 1. Chi H1, ancient Roman merchant ship at night, wooden deck, bioluminescent wake, stars, no moon, warm amber lantern glow, photorealistic 2. Chi, close-up of ancient Greek sailors' weathered hands gripping wet wooden rail, nighttime blue-green bioluminescent water below, photorealistic 3. Strait of Messina from above, rocky cliffs both sides, whirlpool visible, ancient trireme navigating, warm amber sky, photorealistic 4. Chi H4, medieval Carta Marina style map with sea monsters, warm parchment tones, candlelight, desk with navigation tools, photorealistic 5. She, H5, bioluminescent ocean at night, blue-green glow in the wake of a ship, deep black water, stars above, photorealistic 6. 6. Japanese fishing boat at night, dark featureless shape rising from calm water, moonlight, woodblock print inspired, photorealistic 7. H7. Babylonian ziggurat at twilight, Euphrates River in foreground, warm amber sky, cuneiform tablets in foreground, photorealistic 8. 8. Norse longship in stormy North Atlantic, serpent shape visible beneath the waves, dark water, dramatic clouds, photorealistic 9. H9. Roman scholar writing by oil lamp, scrolls and tablets on desk, sea visible through window, warm amber light, photorealistic 10. Chacton solo sailing vessel alone on vast dark ocean, tiny boat against enormous sea, nighttime stars, photorealistic 11. 11. Giant squid tentacle emerging from deep black water, bioluminescent flash, camera equipment visible, deep ocean, photorealistic 12. 12. Deep ocean trench from above, light fading into blackness, hydrothermal vents glowing, photorealistic 13. 13. Ancient ship at dawn, first light on the horizon, calm sea, sailor standing at rail looking east, warm amber tones. Photorealistic track, chapters mood instruments BPM, Suno prompt DPM, Suno prompt or 1-3 suspenseful wonder, deep drones. Distant percussion, creaking wood sounds, water ambience 3540, dark ambient ancient Mediterranean, deep underwater drones, subtle creaking wood, distant rhythmic percussion. Mysterious, sleep safe, no vocals, no sudden changes, the absolute Vili of 2, 4 to 6 curious investigation, oud, light strings, gentle reed instruments, wave ambience 4045, ancient Near Eastern ambient, oud, gentle reed flute, slow strings, scholarly curiosity, warm tones, sleep safe, no vocals. 40 BPM, absolute velo frix the well the vrelo 37 to 9, mythic depth Norse lyre, deep chanting drones, low brass, ice wind 3540, Norse ancient ambient, deep chanting drone, lyre, low brass, mythological depth. Ocean wind, sleep safe, no vocals, dark warm, equal 4 10 13, resolution to rest. Soft strings, gentle wave sounds, dissolving harmonics, 30-35, dissolving ambient. Gentle strings, ocean waves, warm harmonic drone, approaching dawn, deeply peaceful, sleep safe, no vocals. 30 BPM, absolute short one, the smoke detector, 98 words. Every ancient civilization that put boats on water invented sea monsters. Everyone. Babylonians, Greeks, Norse, Japanese, Polynesians, separated by oceans and centuries, no contact with each other. They all invented the same thing. Not because they were stupid, because the monsters worked. An evolutionary biologist named Randolph Nesse discovered that the optimal fear system produces many false alarms. A smoke detector goes off for burnt toast because a smoke detector that ignores burnt toast also ignores real fires. Sea monsters were the ancient ocean smoke detector. The false alarm that kept you alive. Short 2. The hull song, 88 words at 2 a.m. on an ancient ship. The hull starts singing. A moan rising through the wood, no visible source, no rhythm you can predict. You feel it in your feet before you hear it. It is the song of a humpback whale passing beneath you at 200 feet. The wooden hull amplifies it like a guitar body. In 1971, scientists confirmed what whalers already knew. Whale song transmits through wooden hulls. Ancient sailors called it the voice of monsters. They were hearing the ocean's largest creature through the ship's skeleton. Short 3. The six-headed navigation system, 105 words. Homer's most terrifying monster has 6 heads, 12 feet, and a voice like yelping dogs. Scylla lives in a cave on the Italian coast, directly across from a whirlpool called Charybdis. It sounds like mythology. It is a navigation chart. The The Strait of Messina has sea caves that spray water through 6 openings with a barking sound. There is a real whirlpool on the Sicilian side. Homer's monster story encodes the exact hazards. Steer toward the cliff, lose 6 men. Steer toward the whirlpool, lose the entire ship. Ancient sailors who knew the story survived the strait. That was the point. Short 4, the Monster Map, 92 words in 2013. A marine historian overlaid medieval sea monster positions from the 1539 Carta Marina onto a modern hydrographic chart. The monsters mark the actual dangers. The serpent off Norway sits over the Moskströmmen whirlpool system. The creatures near Iceland cluster around the Denmark Strait turbulence. The monsters near the Faroe Islands mark a submarine cliff that generates some of the most dangerous seas in the North Atlantic. Medieval cartographers could not write tidal race, 12 knots, cross-current unpredictable. They drew a monster instead. Same information, different format. Short 5, the bottomless barrel, 86 words. The Japanese sea monster Umibozu rises from calm seas and asks for one thing: a barrel. If you give it a proper barrel, it uses the barrel to pour water into your boat until you sink. If you give it a barrel with no bottom, the water pours through and you survive. The Umibozu is a rogue wave. The barrel is a bilge protocol. The myth is an engineering solution disguised as a monster story. Ancient sailors did not just tell scary stories.